you do have to kind of not tear it from the studs because there's players here, but schematically and identity and DNA wise, you do. Like some of these guys, Quinnen's tweet to me just like showed the signs of a broken player mentally. Yeah. Quinnen's a very, very good player. He is one of the leaders and stars of this team. But the fact that, he dealt, and to be fair to Quinnen, he dealt with Darnold struggles, Zach Wilson struggles, all these backups, that this version of Rodgers to him is the best he's ever seen throughout his long Jets tenure. That them moving on from Rodgers to him is like, oh my God, how could we do this? And that's crazy when you just look league-wide what Rodgers actually was this year and what he is, where he is at in his career. And to your point about actually getting creative or other things involved in the offense, like I don't want to be the guy that just says the Lions did this last year, so this is what the Jets are going to do. But they have made key hires from that spot. And Engstrand was involved in developing the offensive game plans with the team. How about get the tight ends involved? I mean, the Lions ran 12 personnel on 38% of their plays last year, which was very, very high in the league. It actually might be the highest percentage of 12. I know the Raiders were up there, no surprise with the tight ends they have. I know Baltimore's always up there as well. But the Lions, 38% of the time. That's because they want to look heavy and play heavy, but then they also throw to their tight ends because they have Sam Laporta. And you look at the Jets in comparison as well. Like you talk about them being so pass happy and littering the field with wide receivers. They ran 12 personnel less than 20%, 21% of the time. So the tight end's not even an idea or thing in this offense. And to me, the way you run the ball in this league, it depends on your tight ends. Because the reality is your offensive line, especially at this stage for the Jets, is good enough to do their job up front. But the guys, like the drop-off from a tight end that can't block at all to a tight end that could be closer to a sixth offensive lineman and a pass-catching threat can completely change an offense. I mean, even just look at what you watch in the Super Bowl. Like Goddard and Kelsey are obviously really, really good tight ends. All the teams that made it far leaned on the tight end. So and I'm not saying Rodgers is anti-tight end. I'm just saying that it's time to bring in new ideas. The Jets offense is so outdated with Rodgers under center. It's so outdated that it needs a
three
facelift.
Wide, Lazard, Adams.
Think of the personnel. Right. The personnel. And the fact is, too, the Jets barely ever ran from under center last year because of Rodgers' health at this stage in his career where is your play action passing game? You're running it out of the pistol? I mean, that's what we're doing right now. You need a quarterback that can work under center and drop back off play action and actually threaten the field. And if you go through some pains throughout that for the greater good of the offense, I think the modern NFL fan to an extent has become a little broken by Mahomes, Lamar, and Allen. And there's a world where Jaden Daniels can get there. There's a lot of times where Burrow can be there, although Burrow still plays more like a traditional dropback passer. So like Mahomes was less of that this year, but Lamar and Allen just allow you to play offense that is so out there and so rare. And it's just it's an oddity that these guys are in the league at the same time when you just go by percentages. Like we think back to when we were younger, Michael Vick was that guy a lot at times. And I'm sure in the 90s, people will tell you Elway was that guy at times. I think people become so fixated on what those guys do that they think nothing matters until you have that guy. And you're not living in reality if you think that. And that's not how NFL coaches think. And I know we just keep doing the Lions thing, but the Lions are the perfect example. They have an average but very smart quarterback in Jared Goff. Yep. They have two really good running backs that complement each other's skill set. They built up their offensive line. They have a very good tight end, number one tight end. They have an elite slot receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, an elite deep threat in Jamison Williams. They are an offense as a unit. Like all 11 guys matter almost equally, and they were able to implement what they want to do based on that rather than, and I think Joe Brady did a better job of this with Buffalo this year, almost to a fault at times, but Ken Dorsey before him fell victim to this. The offense was, We have an alien at quarterback. And the Chiefs, you know what? The Chiefs are the perfect example of this. The Chiefs trotted out, honestly, some of like the worst 11 across on offense you'll see in a Super Bowl in a while when you really think about it. The line's not good. Xavier Worthy's a rookie, and he was the number one most of the time. Yeah, they lost Rashee Rice, so that's tough. Kelsey's not that guy anymore. He's solid. They don't have a lot of talent in the backfield, to be honest with you. Pacheco came back from injury. He wasn't the same guy, and they have Kareem Hunt off the street. And Mahomes looked human because the protection wasn't good, and they don't have elite pass catchers. So teams fall victim to having an alien. And then look at the Eagles. Nobody in the world thinks Jalen Hurts is a top 8 quarterback in the NFL. Nobody. I don't even know if he's top 10. That's a combo for a different show. They built an elite offensive line. They can run the ball with an elite running back and a good backup in Kenneth Gainwell, by the way. Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and they actually got something out of Jahan Dotson. I think fans need to understand, and I'm not saying all of them are like this, but a lot of people have fallen victim to like building out an actual offensive identity with 11 players that contribute rather than just being like the quarterback will save us, which just failed the Jets, is the most important aspect for a staff getting their first crack.
You have to be able to attack all levels of the defense, and the Jets just have not been able to
and play different ways.
They can't. It's been so long since they've been able to consistently go vertical, and I think Garrett could do more of this, and they just have not used him in that way. Just throw a play action deep post or get a receiver who could go win outside the numbers. I mean, we thought Mike Williams could do this. They never really used him in that capacity. He couldn't get on the same page with Rodgers. He gets sent out of town after, the red line thing. And their tight ends, Conklin's a fine player. I think he's better as like a complimentary tight end.
He's a number 2.
You have to be more dynamic at that position. Look at what Goddard does to that Eagles offense. Look at what Kelsey used to do to that Chiefs offense and what he did in the Texans playoff game for them even earlier. Look how the Bills use Kincaid and Knox. Like, you just need to be more dynamic there, just like the Lions are with Laporta. And it has to be a position, much like safety, that they have to find a way to address that they've ignored for a long period of time. They have to get more dynamic there, and they have to find a way to get more vertical on offense. When we talk with Damian Woody, I think next Monday that comes out, one of the things he kept harping on is just his Jets' inability to go vertical and get chunk plays. Everything had to be 14 plays, 78 yards, 4 yards a clip. Even in the passing game, it was like a running game. There's just got to be a more diversified way to get yards. You have to run the football more. You have to open up the screen game, and you have to be able to go vertical. And it just wasn't going to happen with Rodgers at this phase. Like, he wants to run the 3 wide with Lazard, with Adams, with Wilson when he could be there, but using him more as a shorter intermediate receiver. And they just did not max out Garrett Wilson or Breece Hall last year. Anyone who watches the Jets and watch those guys know that was an issue. So they're going to move on. And I don't know who the quarterback's going to be yet, and we're going to answer more questions around this in War Room. We're going to talk about it a lot until we get an answer. Things happen in the NFL. There is a version where the Jets run an offense that better maximizes the guys we said, run a more balanced offense, and play more complementary football. And even if the quarterback stats on paper don't look as good as Rodgers, it might be more winning football for the Jets because, again, as horrible as quarterback was the 2 years prior to Rodgers, they won more games each of those 2 years than they did last year. They were 7-10, 7-10, and 5-12, which, again, seems incomprehensible, but it's the reality of what happened. I'll close with this final one, which kind of alludes to the similar point, and then we'll jump to War Room. This is from Ronnie Rome. Do you anticipate Glenn trading players from the old regime that are not buying in? There's a lot of players that have done a lot of losing here, and you can't blame them for wanting out. More importantly, could they be bad influences on the new players coming in? So basically, like, how deep do you have to go? When we talked about flushing out the front office, we've talked about flushing out the coaching staff. How deep do you have to go when it comes to flushing out the roster? I look at obvious ones, guys like Clemens and Solomon Thomas and Kinlaw. I feel like those are layup no-brainers. Those are easy. I think the hardest things for Glenn are, and CJ Mosley is not this guy. CJ Mosley's a great leader, but are you trying to do one more year with CJ Mosley?
Right.
It's time to turn the page. Is there one of the young guys that we're excited about that we like here that we view as a building block? Let's call that crew basically Garrett, Sauce, Breece, Jermaine, Will McDonald, Quincy has like maybe the 7 young players. I'll put, and then how could I forget the offensive line? Olu, AVT, Tippmann. So that's about 10 right there where, do one of those guys or two of those guys not really buy it? It's hard for me to see of the guys I named someone really having an issue. It's not crazy to think, though, that I'll use Sauce as a hypothetical. And I think we were probably a little too hot on the potentially trade Sauce stuff in the first half of the year. I think he
Yeah.
leveled out and played better. And I think this scheme will actually be really good for him. And I think he's going to work well with Wilkes and Glenn.
Just needs
But
to
I'll
put the
use
phone away. That's his biggest
yes,
issue.
the phone and the golf. Like maybe it doesn't work. And will there be some type of sacrificial move to like really prove a point? I don't love doing that just for the sake of doing it. But if something's not working, do you say, all right, you know what? We're going to cut our losses. We're going to get what draft capital we can. And like this kind of behavior or effort level isn't going to fly. You're not going to surprise anyone when you get rid of the really bad defensive lineman who got bullied around and played selfish football last year. I'll include Reddick in that bunch as well. They're going to have to make a hard decision. They already made one with Rodgers, right? I don't know where my head goes to what that second one is. I think Mosley's going to retire. They're going to move on anyway. It's got nothing to do with him personally. I do wonder, my mind goes to a guy like Quincy, who really thrived with Saleh and was pretty average before that. There's been some rumblings like new contract. Is he going to hold out, hold in? Did the Jets just say, you know what? Like, we're not even dealing with this bullshit. Like, move on. We'll trade you for a third round pick and like keep it moving. And I'm not picking on him. It very well might not be him. And I'd like him to be here. I'm just trying to figure out like, what is that other unpopular move that they end up making? I don't think it's going to be Garrett Wilson. I think they're going to pay him pretty aggressively. I don't think it's going to be Sauce unless something really goes wrong behind the scenes. Where does your mind go to that before we wrap here?
There's only two that I can really think of that are, and mind you, these are just such low percentage kind of moves, but with the question being the question. Quincy's a good call out by you because you drop the scenario where you go, okay, he's going to be playing his age 29 season. He's on the final year of his deal. He has a very reasonable base salary of $6.5 million. His cap hit is under $8.5 million. If the Jets could go into this and say he's also a player that's like all based off explosiveness and speed.
Yep.
Do we want to pay Sherwood? And then if we know pretty soon that Quincy is going to be asked, and these are things you should be doing now, honestly. Yep. If we know Quincy is going to ask for a new deal, what could we get for him, right? And I'm not saying Sherwood's as good as Quincy because I don't think he is. But Sherwood is just turned 25 years old, by the way.
Big difference.
He just turned 25, where you go, we're going to play Sherwood in Quincy's role. CJ's got one more year left on his deal, and can you do a post-June and save some money? But if you don't save any money, and then we'll draft a guy. Do we pay Sherwood and try to get a third-round pick for Quincy, who's an all-pro? He's 29, but he's going to want a new deal, and we don't think we're going to pay him at age 30. Like, we don't. And that's a move that people on paper might be like, oh, my God, how do you trade an all-pro linebacker for a third-round pick?